Scientists just confirmed what was supposed to be impossible. Beneath the streets of Naples, Italy, a 9-kilometer underground magma highway has physically connected two of the most dangerous volcanoes on Earth, Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius. The same Vesuvius that buried an entire city in hours. The same Campi Flegrei that nearly wiped out human life in Europe 39,000 years ago. Now linked, now sharing pressure, now breathing as one. And the warning coming from scientists right now is unlike anything ever said in modern volcanic history. If one goes, both go. It started on March 13th, 2025. At 3:42 in the morning, an earthquake cracked open the ground beneath Pozzuoli. Within minutes, 847 emergency calls flooded dispatchers. People were reporting steam erupting from cracks in streets, basements, and parking lots. But this was not a burst pipe, not a gas leak. The cracks were following a fault line, one that dropped 9 kilometers straight into the earth and pointed directly at Mount Vesuvius. Then came the discovery that changed everything. Researchers at Stanford University ran the seismic data through cutting-edge artificial intelligence. What they found stunned the entire scientific community. Hidden inside that single earthquake were 54,000 micro-tremors that conventional equipment had completely missed. The caldera was not just shaking, it was tearing itself apart from the inside. And the pressure was not staying put, it was moving, traveling through a newly opened underground corridor, flowing directly into Vesuvius. Within 48 hours, Vesuvius recorded deep tremors for the first time since 1944. Steam vents silent for decades erupted simultaneously across both volcanoes. The chemistry of the gases had changed, deep magmatic sulfur rising to the surface. The connection was not just confirmed, it was actively growing wider and hotter by the day. 3.5 million people live between these two volcanoes right now, and the evacuation plans built to protect them were designed for one eruption at a time, never two. So here is the question that is haunting every volcanologist, every emergency planner, and every person living in Naples tonight. Are we already too late? March 13th, 2025, 3:42 in the morning. A magnitude 4.4 earthquake strikes the Campi Flegrei caldera without warning. It is the most powerful tremor recorded in this region in more than 4 decades. In Pozzuoli, a city of 80,000 people built directly above the caldera, residents are jolted from sleep with violent, disorienting force. Furniture crashes across rooms. Windows shatter. Pictures tear from walls. Car alarms shriek through the darkness across entire neighborhoods simultaneously. Families stumble into the streets in their nightclothes, terrified, disoriented, looking to each other for answers that nobody has yet. Within minutes, emergency dispatchers receive 847 calls. Every single caller reports the same thing: steam erupting from cracks that appeared overnight in streets, basements, and parking lots across the city. The cracks are not random. They are not scattered. They follow a single, precise fault line cutting through the city like a scar. A fault line that drops 9 kilometers straight down into the earth and points directly at Mount Vesuvius. But the true shock does not come from the shaking. It comes from what researchers find hiding inside it. Scientists at Stanford University immediately begin analyzing the seismic data using cutting-edge artificial intelligence techniques. The results stop them cold. The AI system reveals 54,000 micro-tremors buried within the earthquake's signature. Tremors so small, so compressed, so rapid, that every conventional seismograph in the region missed them entirely. This is not the signature of a single seismic event releasing pressure and settling. This is the signature of a system fracturing from within. The caldera is not just reacting to one earthquake, it is tearing itself apart in thousands of simultaneous, invisible pieces. The Stanford analysis then traces where those seismic ripples are traveling. The data shows that the quake opened a deep underground conduit extending 9 kilometers into the Earth. This pathway is not sitting dormant. It is actively funneling pressure waves from Campi Flegrei's magma chamber directly toward Vesuvius. Dr. Tatiana Ventura, a geophysicist at Stanford Earth Sciences, describes the implication with brutal clarity. The geothermal reservoir operates as a sealed pressure system. When the caprock fractures, it creates pathways for fluid migration that can destabilize connected volcanic networks. The seal has broken. The pressure is moving. The discovery triggers immediate alerts to volcanic monitoring stations across Europe. Italian authorities contact emergency management agencies in Rome within hours. Scientists who spent their careers studying these two volcanoes as separate, independent systems are forced to confront a reality their models never accounted for. This is not a routine seismic event that will quiet and fade. This is not isolated unrest beneath one restless caldera. What happened in the early morning hours of March 13th accomplished something that geology textbooks considered a physical impossibility. A single earthquake physically connected Europe's most dangerous supervolcano to the mountain that destroyed Pompeii. Two systems that science believed operated independently are now operating as one. And the pressure building between them has nowhere to go but up. To understand why March 13th, 2025 terrified scientists across the globe, you first need to understand what is sitting beneath the streets of Naples. Not a volcano in the traditional sense, not a cone-shaped mountain with a visible crater. Something far more dangerous, something far harder to see coming. Campi Flegrei. The name translates directly to burning fields. It sits just west of Naples, stretching 8 miles in diameter, and it represents the accumulated destructive power of 600,000 years of eruptions that have repeatedly and violently reshaped the Italian landscape. 3 million people live directly above it right now. Most of them walk over it every single day without thinking about what lies beneath their feet. The origin of Campi Flegrei's power traces back to two of the most catastrophic volcanic events in all of European geological history. The first occurred 39,000 years ago. The Campanian ignimbrite eruption ejected 200 cubic kilometers of volcanic material into the atmosphere in a single apocalyptic release. To put that into perspective, imagine a wall of superheated ash and rock traveling at 300 miles per hour across the entire Italian peninsula. The eruption blanketed Eastern Europe in thick layers of debris and triggered global climate disruptions that lasted for years. Entire species disappeared. Human populations across Europe came close to complete collapse. Campi Flegrei did not just reshape a landscape, it nearly ended a chapter of human history. But it was not finished. 15,000 years ago, the Neapolitan yellow tuff eruption unleashed another 200 cubic kilometers of volcanic fury. This second catastrophic event carved out the very caldera that now sits beneath one of the most densely populated regions in all of Europe. Dr. Giuseppe Mastrolorenzo of the INGV Vesuvius Observatory explains what makes Campi Flegrei fundamentally different from any other volcanic system in Europe. Unlike a cone volcano that builds pressure in one visible location, Campi Flegrei operates as an interconnected pressure system. Its magma chambers sit at depths ranging from 3 to 8 kilometers beneath the surface. Pressure in one chamber affects every other chamber in the network simultaneously. The magmatic plumbing beneath Pozzuoli is a labyrinthine network of chambers and conduits all linked together in a delicate, unstable balance. When one part becomes agitated, the effects ripple outward in ways that are unpredictable and potentially catastrophic. This is not a mountain that might explode. This is a pressure system that could collapse. The warning signs have been visible for decades. As magma and hydrothermal fluids push upward from the depths, the ground itself swells and rises in a process scientists call bradyseism. Ancient Roman ruins that once stood on dry land along the Pozzuoli harbor have slowly submerged beneath the water as the land tilts and shifts. The sea has literally swallowed pieces of history, while the ground prepares something far worse. Campi Flegrei was already one of the most dangerous geological systems on Earth before March 2025. Then it found a partner. The events of March 2025 did not arrive without warning. The warning had been building for decades. Scientists had documented 4 major periods of volcanic unrest at Campi Flegrei since 1950, and every single one of them followed the same deeply unsettling pattern. Each cycle grew more intense than the last. Each one pushed the system closer to a threshold that researchers could measure, but could not predict. The caldera was not dormant, it was rehearsing. The first stage of every unrest cycle begins underground and works its way upward. As magma and hydrothermal fluids push toward the surface, the ground itself starts to swell. Scientists call this bradyseism. It is slow, relentless, and impossible to stop. Since 1950, the caldera floor has inflated by a staggering 4.3 meters in total. But what alarms researchers most is not the cumulative number, it is the acceleration. Current uplift rates have now reached 2 centimeters per month. That represents a 340% increase over previous unrest periods. The ground is rising faster now than at any point in recorded modern history. NASA satellite data has tracked this swelling across decades, and the trajectory points in one direction only. Then comes the seismic fury. As pressure builds within the caldera, the surrounding crust begins to crack and fracture under the strain. From 1982 to 1984, the unrest crisis remains the most visceral example of what this looks like in practice. Campi Flegrei unleashed a relentless barrage of 16,000 earthquakes over the course of 2 years. Some were powerful enough to send residents fleeing their homes in the middle of the night. Buildings cracked through their foundations. Walls collapsed without warning. Families abandoned their houses entirely and slept in their cars for weeks, too afraid to go back inside. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated from Pozzuoli during the height of the crisis. Alongside the shaking comes something residents describe as the smell of danger. Fumaroles and bubbling mud pools scattered across the caldera release noxious clouds of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide directly into the air. The atmosphere thickens with an acrid, suffocating stench that locals compare to rotten eggs mixed with burning chemicals. Residents report persistent headaches, waves of nausea, and burning eyes that do not clear for days. The gases are not just unpleasant. At high concentrations, they are lethal. The final stage is thermal. As magma pushes ever closer to the surface, ground temperatures spike in localized zones scattered across the caldera. Some areas have reached temperatures hot enough to cook an egg directly on bare rock. The heat seeps upward through the soil, through the pavement, through the foundations of buildings where people live and sleep. 4 cycles. 4 escalating warnings, each one louder than the last. Scientists monitored every tremor, every gas reading, every centimeter of ground uplift, and they studied all of it through the lens of one volcano in isolation. That assumption, it turned out, was the most dangerous blind spot in modern volcanology. Within 48 hours of the ground rupture, the signs of what had happened became impossible to ignore. Thermal monitoring stations along the newly formed fault line began registering temperature spikes of 12 degrees Celsius. That single reading told volcanologists something that made them stop cold. Magmatic fluids were not just present beneath the surface. They were moving, traveling, crossing the boundary between 2 volcanic systems that had operated independently for thousands of years. The underground pathway was not just a crack in the rock. It was becoming a highway. Steam emissions surged simultaneously across both Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius within the same 48-hour window. Output from fumarolic vents increased by 340% in less than 2 days. Vents that had sat completely silent for decades suddenly roared back to life without warning, sending towering plumes of vapor into the atmosphere, visible from the streets of Naples. People stood on rooftops and watched the sky above both volcanoes change at the same time. The steam itself was carrying a message that chemical analysis would soon make terrifyingly clear. Scientists collected gas samples from the surging vents and ran the analysis. The results confirmed the worst. The steam jets were now laced with deep, magmatic sulfur compounds. This was not surface water heating up and evaporating. This was not shallow hydrothermal activity. This was the unmistakable chemical signature of magmatic gases rising from deep within the Earth. The chemistry had fundamentally changed. The source had deepened dramatically. Something far below the surface had shifted, and it was announcing itself through every vent across both volcanic systems, simultaneously. Then Vesuvius broke its silence. For the first time since its last eruption in 1944, the volcano began recording deep seismic activity. These were not surface vibrations caused by shifting rock near the summit. These were pressure waves originating from within the magma chamber itself, generated by forces moving through the mountain from the inside out. The mountain that buried Pompeii was waking up, and it was waking up in direct, measurable response to what was happening 9 kilometers away beneath Campi Flegrei. Thermal imaging then revealed the most disturbing development of all. The underground corridor was not stabilizing. It was expanding. Steam pressure was actively fracturing additional bedrock along the entire length of the pathway. Each time a new section of rock gave way, seismic activity spiked again. The connection between the two volcanic systems was not a static crack frozen in place. It was a living, growing, widening structure that was developing faster than researchers could model. Seismic tomography studies added the crucial geological context. A vast magma accumulation layer stretches across the entire Campanian volcanic arc at depths between 8 and 10 kilometers. This reservoir connects systems that scientists spent careers studying in complete isolation. The March 2025 rupture had not created something new. It had reopened something ancient. Connections that took millennia to seal had reopened in days. The two volcanoes were once again sharing pressure, sharing heat, and sharing a future that no modern science had prepared anyone to face. The numbers are staggering, and they do not get easier to process the more you look at them. 3.5 million people live in the Naples metropolitan area right now. Every single one of them wakes up each morning in the shadow of a newly awakened supervolcano system. They drink their morning coffee. They send their children to school. They walk the same streets they have walked their entire lives. But the ground beneath those streets trembles with increasing frequency. New cracks appear in familiar walls each morning, and the smell of sulfur drifts through open windows from vents that did not exist a year ago. The emergency plans designed to protect these 3.5 million people were built on a single assumption: one volcano at a time. Italian government evacuation protocols were developed to handle either Campi Flegrei or Vesuvius as individual threats, each with its own evacuation zone, its own warning timeline, its own direction of escape. Those plans represented decades of careful preparation. They are now dangerously, catastrophically inadequate. The geography of the problem is brutal. The roads leading away from Campi Flegrei do not lead to open, safe ground. They funnel directly toward Vesuvius. Evacuation routes for the two volcanoes do not complement each other. They overlap. They contradict. Traffic modeling shows that highways across the Naples metropolitan area would choke and seize within hours of a simultaneous evacuation order. Communication systems would buckle under the weight of 3.5 million people attempting to call, text, and navigate at the same moment. Emergency services across the entire country would be overwhelmed before the first wave of evacuees reached safety. The situation on the ground offers no comfort to anyone paying attention. Steam vents are opening across Pozzuoli on a daily basis now. Roads buckle and crack as the earth shifts beneath the asphalt. Buildings across the city show new fractures each morning that were not there the night before. Residents have stopped being surprised by the tremors. They have simply incorporated them into their daily lives, which is perhaps the most haunting detail of all. The danger does not stop at the city limits. Atmospheric models show that a coordinated eruption of both volcanic systems could blanket large portions of southern Europe in volcanic ash within days. Flights across the entire Mediterranean would be grounded. Respiratory emergencies would surge in cities hundreds of kilometers from Naples. The agricultural lands surrounding the region, lands that feed millions of people across Europe, would be buried under meters of volcanic debris within hours. The resulting food crisis would send economic shockwaves rippling across the entire European continent for years. The Italian government has raised the alert level for both volcanoes to the highest possible classification. Emergency planners are working around the clock to devise contingency strategies for a scenario that has never been attempted in modern history. Every hour of planning time matters enormously because the thermal signatures are still climbing, the tremors are still intensifying, and 3.5 million people are still waiting for answers that nobody can fully give them yet. Scientists monitoring the connection between Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius have begun using a phrase that sends chills through emergency planning offices across Europe. They are calling what is happening beneath Naples the first domino, not the only one. The Mediterranean basin is not home to two dangerous volcanic systems. It is home to dozens. Mount Etna rises from the eastern coast of Sicily, the most active volcano in all of Europe. Santorini sits in the Aegean Sea, the remnant of an ancient eruption so catastrophic it may have contributed to the collapse of entire Bronze Age civilizations. Stromboli erupts almost continuously off the Italian coast, earning it the nickname the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Volcanic islands are scattered across the Mediterranean floor in numbers most people never consider. All of these systems potentially share deep geological connections to the same underground networks that have now reactivated beneath the Campanian volcanic arc. Seismic data suggests the magma reservoir feeding Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius does not stop at their immediate boundaries. It extends outward. And if the pressure now flowing freely between these two connected systems continues to propagate through those deeper interconnected pathways, the consequences stretch far beyond Naples. Pressure underground does not simply disappear, it travels, and it seeks escape through every available pathway it can find. A cascading chain reaction of eruptions across the Mediterranean basin is not a fringe theory. It is a scenario that volcanologists with decades of experience are now discussing in formal scientific settings, with genuine alarm. The scale of such an event would have no parallel in the entire span of recorded human history. The last time Mediterranean volcanoes erupted in coordinated sequence, there were no cities, no infrastructure, and no millions of people living in the blast zones, the ash fallout corridors, and the pyroclastic flow paths. Every prior geological precedent for this kind of cascading volcanic activity predates human civilization as we know it. There is no historical playbook, no modern framework, and no comparable event that emergency planners can study and learn from. Dr. Mario Wright of the Vesuvius Observatory states the situation with the kind of directness that only comes from someone who has run the numbers and does not like what they show. We are dealing with a completely new paradigm in terms of volcanic risk. The connection between Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius has the potential to impact millions of people and to radically reshape the geography of southern Italy. Volcanologists and geophysicists from around the world are now converging on the region. They arrive carrying the best monitoring equipment available, the most advanced models ever built, and the collective expertise of entire careers. And they are confronting a fundamental, humbling problem. No modern monitoring system has ever observed two volcanic systems reconnecting in real time. The scientific community is operating in territory that has no map, no precedent, and no guaranteed outcome. The first domino has fallen. What comes next is the question nobody can answer with certainty, and everyone is desperate to solve. Every single day brings new data. New tremors register on seismographs across the region. New steam vents are photographed by satellites passing overhead. New cracks are measured in the streets and sidewalks of Pozzuoli by researchers on their hands and knees with instruments pressed against the pavement. The monitoring stations never stop recording. The numbers never stop climbing. And every morning, scientists sit down in front of their screens and find the situation has intensified overnight while most of the world was sleeping. The thermal signatures are growing hotter. Sulfur concentrations and gas emissions are increasing week by week. The frequency of seismic events beneath both volcanic systems continues to rise on a trajectory that shows no sign of plateauing. Ground uplift at Campi Flegrei is holding at 2 centimeters per month, a rate 340% higher than anything recorded during previous unrest periods. These are not subtle fluctuations at the edges of normal variation. These are instruments telling a story with one clear and consistent direction. Volcanologists have identified 4 critical indicators they are watching more closely than anything else right now. The first is the rate of ground uplift acceleration, not just the number itself, but whether that number is speeding up. The second is the depth and chemical composition of gas emissions. The shift to deep magmatic sulfur signatures that occurred in the immediate aftermath of the March rupture was the single most alarming chemical development scientists recorded, and concentrations have continued rising since. The third is the frequency and depth of seismic activity beneath Vesuvius specifically. The deep tremors recorded for the first time since 1944 represented the clearest and most direct evidence of connected pressure. And researchers track every new event with the understanding that each one confirms the link is active and strengthening. The fourth is the physical expansion of the 9-kilometer corridor itself. Thermal imaging continues to show the pathway widening, deepening, and growing hotter. It is not stabilized. It is not slowed. It is developing. The physics of what is happening underground operate according to laws that cannot be negotiated, appealed to, or delayed. Pressure builds until it finds release. Heat rises until it reaches the surface. Fractured rock does not reseal itself on a human timeline. The geological processes now active beneath southern Italy are indifferent to evacuation schedules, political decisions, and scientific debate. They will continue on their own terms, at their own pace, toward their own conclusion. The scientific community has quietly crossed a threshold in how it discusses what is coming. The debate is no longer centered on whether an eruption will occur. The evidence has moved the conversation past that question. The debate now focuses entirely on scale. Will the eruption remain confined to the Naples metropolitan area, a catastrophic but geographically bounded disaster? Or will the pressure cascading through connected underground systems trigger a sequence of events that reaches far beyond Italy's borders? History offers the only reference points available, and none of them are comforting. The instruments keep recording. The corridor keeps expanding. The answer is building somewhere 9 kilometers beneath the surface, and it is getting closer every single day. The ground beneath Pozzuoli is hotter today than it was yesterday. The corridor connecting Campi Flegrei and Vesuvius is wider today than it was last week. The tremors are more frequent today than they were last month. Every measurement, every satellite image, every gas reading, and every seismograph recording points in the same direction. The system is not calming down. It is winding up. What happened on March 13, 2025, was not just a geological event. It was a turning point. For thousands of years, 2 of the most destructive volcanic systems on Earth accumulated pressure separately, built toward eruption separately, and were studied, monitored, and planned around separately. In a single morning, that separation ended. Ancient connections that took millennia to seal were torn open in hours. The underground highway that geology textbooks said could not exist was confirmed, mapped, and measured, and the pressure that once belonged to two isolated systems now flows freely between them as one. 3.5 million people are living inside that reality right now. They feel the tremors beneath their feet. They smell the sulfur drifting through their streets. They watch the cracks in their walls grow longer and wider with each passing week. They understand, in the way that only people living directly above something ancient and furious can understand, that the forces below have reconnected and that what comes next will not ask for permission. Scientists are watching. Emergency planners are preparing. Governments are raising alert levels and drafting evacuation scenarios for situations that have never been attempted in modern history. Volcanologists who dedicated their entire careers to understanding these systems are now confronting the humbling reality that the models they built no longer apply. The caldera that erupted with enough force to nearly erase human life in Europe is building towards something. The mountain that buried Pompeii is responding. The pathway between them grows wider, hotter, and more active with every day that passes. The only question that remains, the one that every instrument, every researcher, and every resident of Naples is now living inside, is whether the world is truly ready for what comes next.